Good morning, everyone. So, I don't think I was here by choice, initially. Mark Montovio, if you're in the audience, thanks to you. You spoke to me a few months ago saying, why don't you do GibTalks? And I said, well, I haven't even thought about it. I haven't even listened to a GibTalk before. I never got a chance to come. But that was our conversation. No end, no discussion. A week later, I got an email from Julian. Thank you for agreeing to take part in GibTalks. So for me, I think I was planted here for some reason, and maybe there is a good reason for it. So everybody asked me, a few people asked me, oh, you're doing GibTalks. Are you going to talk about nursing? Are you going to talk about allergy, which is the field that I recently studied? Are you going to talk about public health? Are you going to talk about yoga? Things that are really important to me, my passion, my life. And I said, no, really, I haven't thought about what I'm going to talk about. And I didn't really want to talk about health. I didn't want to talk about yoga, because those are things I live every day. And I thought, well, I need to talk about something different. And I almost emailed and said, I don't really want to do this. I'm not going to do it. And then I spoke to my daughter, who's a little bit like my second brain. And I said, well, I don't know. She said, Mom, go, just do it. And I said, I'm going out of my comfort zone. I'm going to get myself into the picture, and I'm going to talk about being a migrant. Now, out of curiosity here, how many of you think of yourselves as migrants? Show of hands, anyone? A migrant, a traveler. Okay, so when we look at migration, you think about animals migrate for seasonal migration, as you see in my visual there. But it's not just about the animals, the sea life, the birds. They migrate for greener pastures, but humans migrate too, and humans migrate for different reasons. Humans migrate also for weather conditions, for work, employment, better life, sometimes political and social pressures. You know, there are different reasons why we migrate. But regardless of the background and the reason why you migrate, you know, there is always something behind each person that has a special story. And for me, I thought that was really important, because whilst many of you might know me as the person who works in public health today, the person who worked in primary care, the person who worked in ITU, the person who teaches yoga and does a lot of complementary therapies, there is something behind that I think many of you do not know, and I thought it was important to share that. I was not born in Gibraltar. I have been here exactly 30 years in August. 30 years since I came to Gibraltar, 1988. Coincidentally, a few weeks ago, my daughter emailed me from university in UK and asked me, Mum, when I grew up, was there ever any concern about me being of a different color when I was in school? And it struck me as really strange. She had watched an episode of Grey's Anatomy, the latest one, and it affected her being slightly different color. And I thought, well, it never affected me. I never thought about it as you being of a different color. I know sometimes my son came home and said, Mom, they look at me and they say I'm not white and things like that. So I thought it's really important to talk about these things. You know, we don't really think about people's racial backgrounds or ethnic backgrounds. So I thought we'll talk about migration. So like I said, people migrate for different reasons. And sometimes when you look at migration stories, like we've done recently from Syria, for example, there are some very unhappy and sad stories where people are almost dehumanized, alienated, and excluded quite considerably, and that's quite painful. So, hello, Theo. My grandson's up there. Okay, so a migrant, an immigrant, an expat, an evacuee, a refugee, a settler, a foreigner, an intruder. A gypsy. I think I'm a gypsy. I'm quite gypsy in my outlook, my clothes sense, my mindset. Very gypsy in many ways. A transient, a wanderer, a nomad, a squatter, an outsider. All these form what is a migrant. So to demystify, I thought, well, I'll look a little bit further. And I look at historically religions. For example, in the old days, Muhammad went to Medina to look for truths. Jesus was a nomad, traveled, and Prince Siddhartha, by the way, my son is Siddhartha, his name's Siddhartha, he was a prince that left his home in search of human truth and happiness that was not to be found in a rich palace. So people have been traveling all along, people have been wanderers all along. So why is it that we still find it so hard sometimes to accept somebody as a traveler who comes, you almost feel like people are intruding your space, and you see that quite a lot. So I thought, well, it was nice to talk about that. Today, there are 224 million migrants globally. That's 3.3% of the world population is migrant, okay? Looking at Gibraltar, I think we're very blessed. We have such a cultural and ethnic fusion of people. We have people from all over. And Gibraltarians have had settlers come right 300 years ago, settled in Gibraltar. You have people from Spain, Portugal, Malta, Sicily, Genoa. You have the Indians and other settlers who came in and made their home here. And it's beautiful to see that we have such a closely knit global community within this small rock. It's very refreshing to see that we live with no comparison, or at least I hope we don't have comparisons and judgments about people from where they came from. So what happens to us when we feel ourselves in that situation of being a migrant? I will tell you about my personal story, which is very, very, very important to me, because I think that it's nice to share that, to see what lies behind somebody else's personal story. And when you migrate or when you come from one place to another, sometimes you're torn between fission and fusion. You have to leave things behind. You have to assemble and accumulate new ideas, new societies. And I have lived that through my trajectory of migration. So my personal story goes back quite a while. Partition of India and Pakistan, 1947. My grandparents lived in the joint country before the partition in the province of Sindh. And for those of you, there's one person here, I know my auntie sitting here, and she was part of that migratory process. She was 2 years old. I asked her the question, she said, I was only 2, I don't remember. But my mum remembers because she told us about it. And there was a lot of massacre, a lot of turmoil, a tsunami of riot when the partition happened. Pakistanis moved towards Pakistan, the Indians and the Hindus and the Sikhs moved to India. And that's what my grandparents did with their little families. And you see, it actually happened. My mom tells us stories about this evacuation process, which is quite hard. Once my grandfather moved from this area to India, he decided he needed to go far to set up a business or try and set up his life with his family. So he moved to Africa and settled in Nigeria for a while, and then in Ghana. He set up business in Ghana, but he sent his 3 daughters to India to study and live with family while he set up his business. And that was what happened. My father's family, also during the immigration process, moved to India, but my father was raised in India. And when he was about 15 or 16, he moved to Ghana, also in search of better life. He migrated to seek, like we have a lot of the people here that come into the shops and work here. And in the 60s, my grandparents invited back their 3 daughters to Ghana to live with them. Business was established, and my mother's marriage was arranged to my dad in 1961. And it was a very big affair, attended by lots of dignitaries. My grandfather was a very well-known businessman in Ghana. My parents lived there, and I was born in Kumasi, in the town of Kumasi in Ghana. My brother was born a year before me. We were still immigrants. We were still immigrants even in Ghana, even though we were born there, okay? But it didn't feel like that because we were happy, and the people around us, they were, again, a fusion of cultures, Lebanese, Germans, English, Swiss. There were a whole lot of people in Ghana, so we had a really happy childhood. But even there, we were called Bronies. Brony is the tree, the dialect there for white man. I'm not white, but I was a Brony. And the little kids used to run around and they used to talk about us and say brony and point fingers. And we were raised like that, but it wasn't bad. We were very happy children. Our life was really good in Ghana. We had the best of everything. Business was good. We had lots of outings, and we had a very happy childhood. Come the 70s, business was a little bit unsettled, and my father decided that he wanted to send us back to India. In the interim period, my grandparents had then retired and moved back to Bombay, and they had settled in Bombay. So we were sent, my brother and me, I was 7 years old, I was sent to Bombay with my brother to live and be in school there while my father established his business or settled things financially. Those were very trying years for my brother and me. We were very young, and at that time, something else quite drastic happened. We didn't feel at home because we missed our parents. We were too young to be away. But something bigger happened, the Indo-Pak War of 1971. 70-71. And we experienced that. My aunties, my uncles were living in the same house, and they did their best to protect us and love us because they knew that we felt very alien in that home. Even though we had been growing up with them, we felt very alienated. We felt homesick. We missed our parents. We were too young to be away. And then this war happened. And I remember my grandfather had these bunk beds made up for us in the room. And we used to sleep on the bunk beds. And during the raids, we could see the aircraft flying. And my poor grandmother, she was petrified for us because she said, these are not my children, these are my grandchildren. I want them to go back to their parents. And she used to look at us, and when the raids happened, the sirens would go. We lived on the 7th floor of this building. And when the siren went, she would come and cuddle us together, and she said in Sindhi, "Minja Bara, come, let's take them down with cotton in our ears," and we would go down to the basement of the building till the siren went again and we could go back home. When we went to school on the school bus, the same thing happens. The siren would go, we would have to offload the school bus, get into a shelter, and then get back on. And for that year and a half, my brother and me had this trying time where we felt like we would never see our parents. My aunties had friends. They were in their early 20s at the time, and they had friends who used to come home and play music. And I remember one night there was this guy singing on a guitar, "Where's Your Mama Gone?" And we cried so much when we heard that song because we thought we'd never see our parents again. It was quite a trying time for us those years. So they decided that maybe we should go back to our parents. So we were sent back to our parents in 1971. And we lived there again. My brother went to an English school called Ridge School in Kumasi, and unfortunately, and I was very angry and sad about that, I never got to go to Ridge School. I got to go to the Ghanaian school. So my classmates were all 10 Ghanaian children and 1 Lebanese boy, Hafa, and myself. That was my class. And I always felt like, why did my parents do that? They don't like me enough. I went to this school and my brother went to the foreign school. But it was just circumstance and how it presented itself. Saying that, we stayed there, we got into education, and it was really, we were happy people. And then suddenly things took another turn in 1973, and there was a lot of unrest, political unrest. The Bouzia government was overthrown, and again, my father feared for his family, and he somehow wanted to come back and live in India. So we came back. We traveled, we came back, we did a little tour, came to Spain, to Las Palmas, Torremolinos. We had a little holiday, and then we went to India. And we stayed, this time we went not to Bombay, we went to Bangalore, where my father's family was settled. We stayed in Bangalore there. But then again, we were immigrants, we were migrants. So we've had so many sets of migration over the years. My trajectory, as you see, my grandparents traveled from Pakistan to India, then back to Africa, then back to India, and this is how and then obviously I come back down in a short while to 1988 when I came to Gibraltar. When I was in India, I went to school there. I felt so miserable. I had the same color as my peers. I was Indian from Indian parents, but I never fitted in. They laughed at my accent. They laughed at the way I dressed because I wore socks and shoes. And it was different. My style, my whole person was different, and I couldn't fit in. I felt really excluded when I was studying in India in the first few years of my education. And it was very, very hard, those 4 years of my schooling. But nonetheless, we just plodded on. And we did. My brother did his. We had separate schools. My brother went to a boys' school. I went to a girls' school. We did our education there. And then things moved on. I did my first degree in Bombay at the Institute of Hotel Management and Catering Technology. And then a few years later, lots of family upheavals. And then finally, I decided that I'll come here. I was visiting. I came on holiday. I came to Spain on holiday in 1988. I came to Gibraltar, also 1988, because my aunt lived here. I came to visit here. And I stayed. I stayed for 7 years, thought about going back. But then I met my husband, who is also a migrant, father from Bristol, mother-in-law from La Linea. And he was born in Germany. So you see, we are all a cultural mix of everything. And I'm just a gypsy. My kids are born here. And my whole family is very diverse. And so for me, I never look at somebody as to where they come from or what color their skin is. It doesn't really matter. I found it very interesting to read something by a fellow Ghanaian novelist, Tai Selassie, who says that it's really wrong to identify somebody from the country they come in, because countries are man-made. So I leave you with one little quote on the screen, because I don't think I have the time to read it out to you. Life is a migratory process, and you must know that there's much beyond just the person and the one story. Share your stories, because everybody has a story to tell, and just not one story, more than one story. Thank you very much.